A 6-year-old stepped into the lights with a mandolin that looked like it belonged to someone twice his size, and the room went still in that sacred, hush-your-breath way. The invitation came from Bill Monroe, a founder who could slice the night with a single downstroke. Ricky Skaggs lifted the pick and answered. Notes sprang clean as creek water. Time widened. You could say a prodigy arrived. You could also say a long fuse was lit. Because the moment a child borrows a legend's instrument, the expectations stop being cute and start being permanent. Admiration feels warm from the front row, but for the one under the light, it can feel like a promise you're terrified to break. That first ovation was more than applause. It was a contract. The kids signed it with tone. But that wasn't the whole story, because the next chapter would test whether a bright beginning could survive the shadow it throws. The next spotlight found him even younger than most school talent shows will allow. He appeared on Flatt & Scruggs' Martha White show at 7. Small frame, big tone, no safety net. Audiences loved the contrast. It made for lovely television. Yet early fame is a tricky teacher. Clapping crowds can freeze an image of you that's impossible to outgrow, and every veteran within earshot knows it. Some try to protect you, some try to measure you. Ricky learned how to say thank you and then play anyway. Not harder, not faster, just truer. The sound in his hands suggested a place you couldn't buy a ticket to. Porch light pooling on old wood, a voice running alongside a fiddle like water alongside rock. It was as if the songs recognized him. But that wasn't the whole story either, because admiration from strangers is one kind of fuel, and the next kind, the kind that lasts, would come from the road. Then came the test that grows boys into craftsmen. Keith Whitley entered the picture, another teenager with mountain dust on his boots and a voice built for heartbreak. The pair found each other like magnets, aligning instinct and appetite. They sang the old repertoire until it sounded new again, not because they changed it, but because they meant it. Ralph Stanley heard that honesty and drafted them into the Clinch Mountain Boys. Class was in session, long drives, cold dressing rooms, harmonies that had to lock the first time, not the third. The songs carried ghosts, and you had to let them through without getting lost yourself. That's where Ricky learned what discipline really feels like. The weight of tradition balanced on a tiny piece of pick between your finger and thumb. It's where he learned how precision can still bleed. But even that wasn't the whole story, because the next opportunity would trade the rough cut of back roads for a different kind of pressure entirely. The leap was a phone call from Elegance itself. Emmylou Harris asked Ricky to join her hot band, a crack outfit with arrangements as graceful as lace and as tough as boot leather. He said yes, and learned that refinement can be as fierce as rawness. He arranged parts for an album steeped in bluegrass, proved that a mountain cadence can bloom inside a polished frame, and picked up a new education in restraint. Every space matters. Every harmony carries history. Yet apprenticeship only lasts as long as your courage lets it. So when the solo call came, it didn't whisper. It dared. Step out. Stand there. Own your name in letters tall enough to be read from the cheap seats. Success fixes a lot of doubts. Failure writes your story for you. He stepped anyway. But that step wasn't the whole story, because the stage he was walking toward would bless him and measure him in the same breath. The Grand Ole Opry is a sanctuary and a proving ground, and when Ricky walked into membership, he did it younger than most and heavier with expectation than many. The circle beneath his boots carried the wear of legends, the eyes around him carried the quiet math of merit. Some nights that math is generous, some nights it's ruthless. He felt both. The welcome was warm, but the measurement was colder than applause. Every entrance order meant something, every encore meant more. He learned that the Opry is a church where you tithe with craft and a chessboard where every move broadcasts a message you may not intend. Still, the place fit him. He played the old songs like heirlooms you actually use and the new ones like heirlooms you haven't inherited yet. But that was still not the whole story, because the wider country audience was leaning in and the tide was about to turn his way. Momentum followed, then something louder than momentum. Critics reached for a label and landed on neotraditional, a fancy way of saying old truths were ringing again. Hits showed up because the core of the sound never left. It had just been waiting for the right messenger. Chet Atkins, a gatekeeper with ears sharpened by decades, tossed off a quip that stuck, suggesting Ricky had single-handedly yanked country music back toward its backbone. Hyperbole? Of course. But there's a reason the line spread. A lot of listeners heard their grandparents' radio inside his singles without feeling old themselves. He wasn't doing museum work. He was building living rooms. The hooks were clean, the rhythm sections unarguable, the fiddles not decoration but spine, and yet even a run of number. 1S can start to feel like a corridor leading to a door you didn't mean to choose. The next turn would prove that the scoreboard wasn't the goal. Then he slipped into a different chair, one with glass in front and faders at his fingertips. Producing Dolly Parton's return to country record in 1989 demanded fluency and sparkle and soil, and he spoke both dialects. The sessions parked rhinestones beside rough-cut rhythm, not as compromise but as design. The payoff was undeniable. New number 1S, a reminder that a classic voice didn't need to chase trends to dominate them. Ricky's name wasn't on the cover photo, yet his fingerprints were on everything that mattered. It's rare to help another artist retake the throne while your own brand is still blazing. He did it with the same quiet rigor he brings to a mandolin break. Serve the song and let the results brag for you. But this wasn't the full story either, because a choice waited just ahead: comfort on a big stage or conviction on a narrower road. After dominating the wider country landscape, he did the counterintuitive thing. He went home to bluegrass by choice, not necessity. That kind of turn reads like retreat to outsiders. To insiders, it reads like conviction. He formed Kentucky Thunder, a band so synced they could thread 16th notes through a keyhole, and launched a label with his family name stamped on the spine. The mission wasn't nostalgia, it was stewardship. Stompers that blistered, waltzes that floated, gospel pieces that landed like a hand on your shoulder when you needed one. The rooms got more intimate. The stakes got higher. Because when you stand this close to an audience, there's nowhere to hide. But that's the point. The harder way sharpens you. Awards came, and they felt like weather reports, proof that the climate still favored craft. Even so, the next challenge wasn't about trophies, it was about balance. Edge and polish rarely coexist for long, but he kept them in the same room. The secret was discipline. Rehearsals didn't end when the chart looked tidy. They ended when the song felt inevitable. Mechanics mattered. So did heat. He rode the line between head and heart like a tightrope he'd chosen willingly. That balance is why his shows never drifted into museum territory. Fast tunes moved as if chased. Ballads settled like snowfall, light and absolute. He rotated arrangements to avoid comfort, swapped solos to keep fingers honest, and kept the groove where the floorboards talk back. Some call that perfectionism. He calls it respect, for the instrument, for the people who paid to listen, for the elders whose names are still carved into the bones of the genre. But music is also community, and the next chapter would prove how harmony can do what speeches can't. Part of the glue holding all of this together is friendship, and one of the most resonant examples arrived in harmony. Vince Gill wrote a modern standard in the wake of loss, and when it came time to record, he called on voices that could carry grief without theatrics. Ricky stacked a harmony part that felt like a hand on a shoulder, the kind of support you hear as much as feel. That collaboration didn't just win awards. It threaded a private sorrow into a public comfort, and it nodded toward the memory of a teenager who once shared every mile of a hard road. That's what the best music does. Translates ache into something singable. And when the song shows up later at funerals and farewells, the harmony returns like a promise kept. Still, even harmony has to step aside when life speaks louder than any chorus. Surprises kept arriving because he kept inviting them. He stepped onto stages with musicians far outside the bluegrass fence and found common ground in pulse and phrasing. Jam bands discovered that a mandolin can shoot lightning when it wants to. Piano men with jazz leanings learned how a mountain melody can ride their changes and still sound rooted. Irish players traced kinship lines across the Atlantic and grinned at how naturally the tunes braided together. None of it felt like gimmickry. It felt inevitable, like streams meeting in the same valley. He could honor Monroe on a Tuesday and trade eights with an unlikely partner on a Friday without either side losing color. But experiments mean little without stakes, and the highest stakes arrived not in a studio, not on a stage, but in a hospital room where the next breath becomes the only measure. Then life interrupted with the kind of message that cuts through any career plan. Chest pains, tests, a doctor's tone that leaves no room for doubt. The surgery needed was the big one, the sort of intervention that rearranges priorities and clarifies what can't wait. He went into the hospital with the same stubborn calm he brings to a tricky arrangement. He came out with gratitude humming in every sentence. Recovery tightened his focus rather than softening it. The first shows after the operation felt like the first day of spring after a winter that overstayed its welcome. The notes weren't just notes anymore, they were evidence. Audiences knew it. The ovations sounded like relief and celebration braided into one rope. And still, he didn't make it about heroics. He made it about the gift of getting to do this again. The work resumed, steadier than before. Recognition followed in the form of a medal that almost no one grows up imagining. It's the kind of honor that usually arrives at the end of a paragraph, but Ricky treated it like a comma. He smiled, shook hands, gave credit where it was due, and went back to rehearsal. The point wasn't the ceremony. The point was memory, what it represents about a half-century spent choosing songs that matter and playing them like they're the last chance to say something true. Awards are lovely, work is lovelier. He keeps both in their place. Because the people who inspired him were never chasing decorations. They were chasing sound, and the sound isn't through with him yet. If anything, it's calling louder, which brings the story back to its beginning, to a stage, a circle, and a simple question. What do you have to say tonight? Legacy in his world isn't a bronze bust. It's a habit. He hires young players who scare him just enough to make him sharper. He gives them space to fail in rehearsal so they can soar in front of crowds. He hands out second solos when a first one bristles with possibility. He remembers that someone once lowered a mandolin into his hands and trusted him to make noise worth hearing. Now he returns that trust with interest. You can watch the handoffs happen mid-song, a nod, a step back, a grin when a risk lands clean. The audience hears the baton change and cheers for both the toss and the catch. That's leadership in this business. Not speeches, not slogans, but generosity measured in measures, and if you want the proof, check the line of pickers waiting after shows, eyes bright, hands itching to learn. Which brings us to the circle again, because everything in this story does. There's a piece of stage that holds history the way oak holds weather, and every time his boots touch it, you can see the boy and the veteran overlap. He doesn't tiptoe onto that wood. He steps like he knows the rules and intends to honor them. He places the mandolin where it belongs, glances at the band, and counts off something that sounds like home. The first solo is a declaration. The second is a conversation. The last chorus is a benediction. When the final chord rings, he lets it breathe. He wants the sound to find every corner, crawl into every pocket of silence, and settle there. Then he smiles, because the job isn't to own that circle. It's to leave it a little brighter for the next pair of boots. You could stop here and call it triumph, but that would miss the tension that keeps the line taut. Ricky's career is a duel between comfort and curiosity keeps winning. Every time the formula threatens to set, he scrambles it. Change keys, change tempos, change who sings the third harmony. He refuses to let the music turn into furniture, and he refuses to let the past turn into a museum brochure. That stubbornness gives the work its bite. It also gives the audience permission to lean forward. They don't know exactly what they'll hear tonight. They only know it will be honest. Honest can be graceful. Honest can be wild. Honest can be both within the same bridge. That's the trick, and it's not really a trick. It's a promise, renewed nightly. So what does it mean after all this time? Maybe it means that greatness isn't a straight line from promise to proof. It's a loop that returns to the source again and again, each time bringing back something new. Ricky Skaggs began with a borrowed mandolin and a town's attention. He grew into a band leader who can make a hall feel like a front porch, and a front porch feel like a hall. He took the long way through genres and the short way to the heart of a song. He risked comfort for conviction and came out steadier. He learned how to carry history without turning it into homework, and he learned how to meet a crowd without pandering to it. The result is simple and hard, a life spent turning strings into stories people believe. And here's the part that stays after the credits: the way one player can make a room feel taller. Ricky does it without saying much. He tunes, he smiles, he glances at the band, and the pulse changes in the seats. People sit up, phones go dark, stories wake. That's the magic nobody can counterfeit. The thing awards try to describe and always miss. If you want proof, don't take anyone's word. Listen to the next downbeat. Count the spaces between the notes. Notice how every rest feels loaded with intent. Watch the last chord climb the rafters and hang there like a lantern. When it finally fades, you'll know the reason the kid kept his promise to the legend. Wait, patience, promise. But there's another layer that explains why the promise still feels new. Home steadies hands that chase difficult music, and Ricky treats home less like a finish line and more like a tuning fork. Morning coffee, a hymn half-hummed, road cases by the door like patient dogs. Ordinary days keep the show honest. He'll polish a break until it vanishes, go pull weeds, then return, and find the part better for the dirt under his nails. Supper is laughter and stories that circle one idea. Songs are chores you choose gladly. When the van idles, he checks the set list against the weather and the moon. Respect for journeys you can't predict. Festivals sharpen the same truth under a big sky. Watch the sun slide behind folding chairs and feel the air change when sound check becomes showtime. He likes those stages because night carries notes farther than rafters. People bring quilts, kids fall asleep inside the bass. Past the merch tent, a ring of pickers trades licks learned from his records, some clean, some chaotic, all honest. He doesn't step in to steal the spotlight. He listens, laughs, nudges a chord, and leaves the circle warmer. Back on stage, he treats the crowd like neighbors, a fast tune first, a story second, a waltz third. By the time the moon clears the speakers, the field is breathing in time. Studio work asks for a different kind of nerve. The red light clicks on, and every breath has gravity. Ricky treats microphones like neighbors, never shouted at, never ignored. When the band gathers around one mic, he moves like a compass needle until the blend turns to butter. When a track needs separation, he trusts the song more than the meters and lets the click serve the groove. The best take feels slightly dangerous, where control and surrender shake hands. That's why final mixes carry air around the edges. You can hear the room, the glance, the grin when a risky run lands. It's proof that precision can sweat and still sound human. He keeps faith with small choices the way some people keep diaries. Fresh strings before the downbeat, not because shine matters, but because response does. A softer right hand when a lyric needs breath. A firmer foot when the room drifts. The show stays alive because he refuses autopilot. He'll offer a gentle joke, shorten it if the laugh lingers, lengthen it if the room needs air. He reads faces the way others read charts. When a soldier in row 3 blinks during a gospel line, he lowers the tempo and lets the harmony lean. When a child rides a parent's shoulders, he reaches for a melody that lifts without shouting. And if you want the secret he rarely states, it's this. His whole career is a long listening. Listening to elders, to partners, to a room, to silence. Listening to the part of a song that isn't written yet. The world keeps changing shape, trading tapes for files, but listening still finds the path. He follows it tonight, the way he did with that borrowed mandolin. The promise remains and renews itself the oldest way, by keeping time together, faithfully.